It's much more interesting to see the world in what I call super cycles. The world goes through these big super cycles, which can last for 3 or 4 decades, which are economic, which are ideological, and which are always technological.
Welcome to What Matters. We're joined by David McWilliams. We're privileged to be joined by David McWilliams, an economist, author and broadcaster. David writes for the Irish Times, hosts the David McWilliams podcast, is an adjunct professor in global economics at the Trinity College in Dublin, and had a proper job once. He was an economist at the Irish Central Bank and worked at UBS and BNP. Just for some context, David's written an international bestseller, a number one international bestseller called Money, A Story of Humanity, and he's in Sydney at the moment and also featured at an event we held at MA last night for more than 200 guests or so. David, welcome to What Matters.
Tom, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Absolute pleasure. It's great. It's been wonderful. I'm here for a couple of weeks. It's been a great time. So, if you've had a job for an itinerant economist who can, talk about the world, I'll have it. It's an amazing city. It's a great city.
We could do with an economist. Andrew Pridham, as always.
Tom, how are you? It's always great to meet an economist that's making a living. So,
well, we're very few. There's very few. It's a rare species.
Congratulations.
Exactly, yeah.
And we have a lot in common. I'm an adjunct professor as well.
And we're both ex-UBSers.
Ex-UBSers, and I have Irish blood. So, and we've both written a book.
You've
written lots of books.
So this. No, listen, Andrew. Good to meet you. It's great to be here, guys.
Just touching on David's book, as I mentioned, it's a bestseller, a Financial Times Economic Book of the Year and the Economist Book of the Year in 2024. So that's been a phenomenal success, David.
It's great. And I mean, the one thing sometimes the pandemic had one or two upsides. And the upside was I was locked in the basement for 2 years. And what do? I had this book to write, and then we decided to in my head, I just decided, look, let's write a proper history of money. And the basis, and you'll probably agree with this sometimes, Andrew, I was sitting there over the last 20 years, realizing that my tribe, economists, who claim to be able to explain money and unlock the secrets of money, actually don't understand it. This is back to your point about economists making their living. And so once you take the view that maybe the high priests who've anointed themselves with the responsibility of explaining money to the punters don't understand it, you begin to see money in a totally different way. So the idea about the book, the major idea in the book, is that money is this amazing technology that humans invented. And as a result of our relationship with money, we have progressed dramatically. And you can't understand human progression, civilization, and all those things that we regard as the achievements of this species without understanding our relationship with this amazing social technology that we invented about 5,000 years ago. So that's the general idea. And it was a joy to write. Sometimes you've written books, Andrew, when you're sitting at home and you're scribbling and you're kind of chuckling to yourself, say, yeah, that works. And you're enthusiastic about the research. That's when you know you have something that could work well. And, luckily, big outfits like the FT and the Economist, came in last year and said, yeah, this is worth reading. So it's translated now into 23 languages. And it means I'll be on a book tour for the next 5 years in a variety of places. Oh, it's great. It's been wonderful. Sometimes you just alight on these ideas and they work. And I know, having written 6 books, when they don't work. So you actually think, you'll write one, it'll sell well, it'll do well, and then you're on the pig's back, as they'd say in Ireland. Nah, you've no idea. And it's the same in business. If one product works, if one idea works.
Is exactly correct.
Yeah.
You never know.
And you think you're doing well because your last gig worked, and you introduce a new product, in my case a book or whatever it is, and the market just says, nah, we're not having it.
Do you think you've got better at writing as you've got more experience?
Yeah, you have. I think you get better. You adopt a style, and I think you become more exacting with the prose. You're more sparing with the language, and that's, again, it's like everything in a career. It's a process of osmosis. You've been doing it a long time. And if you're not getting better at it, you should do something else for a crust.
Well, you obviously have a very successful podcast series, which I listen to in my car.
That's great. That's brilliant, Andrew.
Driving over the Harbour Bridge. And I enjoyed it immensely because there's a lot of Irish humour in the delivery. And, of course, you are visiting Australia and you describe essentially Australia as some sort of utopian place.
Yeah.
sitting out in the middle of nowhere, where the economy is strong, always strong, the people are happy, everything's successful. Do you really believe that? Because it's hard as an Australian to hear that and believe it.
Well, I think that what always happens is the people who are most critical of their own are themselves, and that should be the way, because there's nothing worse than a race that pats itself on the back all the time. But if you travel around a wee bit, and if you live in Europe as I do, and you travel around a lot in Europe, you come to Australia, there is an energy here. There is a vitality, there is a spirit, which is very hard to put your finger on, but it's self-evident. I mean, I was in this city the last time in 2013. It is indescribably different when I look at it. Now, that type of effervescence comes from somewhere. We can talk about, so economics is many things. So economists will always talk about policy and this and the rate of interest and the rate of inflation. That's all what drops out of the energy. What actually drives economics is what Keynes referred to as animal spirits. And there is a spirit here. I can see it. It's self-evident. And you are blessed by the fact that this is an island, which also happens to be a continent, which also happens to be a country. This is all unique. It's the biggest island in the world. You're blessed with resources. You are blessed with a certain amount of area that people can live in. But it is intriguing that Aussies only live in 2% of the landmass of the place. And I think that what Australia has going for it is this combination. Also serendipitous, you realize you live in Asia, which is a good place to live in the 21st century. It's a bit like living in Europe in the 19th century. It's where the action is. So my sense is that whatever the internal warts are, whatever the internal problems are, whatever you might magnify in the pub when you're having a chat with your mates, I can't believe this is happening, etc. If you stand back and take a wee bit of altitude, it strikes me that you've a lot more things going right than going wrong. And that seems to be the case. I was looking, for example, even the debt GDP of this country, if you take that as indicative of a sensible policy, it's hardly changed in 25 years. And yet the economy is growing all the time and you're spending stuff, you're spending on infrastructure. That means that I know you mightn't think so as locals, but there is a certain amount of stability in the governance here, which is unusual. You know, look at what's happened in the United States, a country that Australia is regularly compared to. You know, we have a pretty chaotic backdrop there. So my sense is that, not being too much the beguiled foreigner, but my sense is there's a lot of things going right here.
You have come across bogans.
I love
Seem
a bogan.
to be your favourite
I love
people.
a bogan.
You've been to a...
As a member of the bogan tribe, as a fully paid up member.
Well, you've been to an AFL game. To what? Well, not really. You saw Fremantle play, but if you came and watched the mighty Sydney Swans...
I would love to go. I would love to go. As I said, AFL is Gaelic football for good-looking fellas.
Yeah.
If you need... The fellas need to be uglier, right? And then it will be a proper sport.
Well, that's the administrator's role.
Okay.
So we let the beautiful guys wear shorts. But no, it's... So you talk about the United States, tariffs, obviously a big topic of discussion, and the volatility that's created globally. What do you see as behind the sort of tariff narrative, and where's it going to end?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, if we go to the psychology of it, self-confident countries do not raise tariffs. Self-confident countries say, you know what, bring it on. I'll compete in the open market. So I think that the tariff narrative in America is a reflection of American vitality having been undermined for a variety of reasons. They identified China as the major problem in this, the major manufacturing problem. You know, economic history is the history of countries ebbing and flowing. So you're up sometimes, you're down sometimes. What we're seeing is, and this is what I would like to, what we're seeing is the gradual but relentless shift of manufacturing prowess from America and Europe to Asia. That's what's happening. And I like to see the world, sometimes, you know, economists see the world in business cycles, like short cycles, you know. I think it's much more interesting to see the world in what I call super cycles, that the world goes through these big super cycles, which can last for 3 or 4 decades, which are economic, which are ideological, which are political, which are cultural, and which are always technological. And if you think about the world we live in and our parents lived in, let's say from 1945 after the Second World War to, let's say, 1990, the fall of the Berlin Wall was one big 4-decade-long super cycle. It was the Cold War, communism versus capitalism, very little free movement of people, very little free movement of capital, very little free movement of goods. It was a period of big government all around the world, big trade unions. It was a period of high inflation, high real interest rates, and that was one super cycle defined by the Cold War. 1990, the fall of the Berlin Wall, we've got this new super cycle, which is lasting to around now. And that's the rise of China, globalization, free trade, free capital movement, small government, low inflation, low interest rates, driving asset prices. And we could call this broadly the era of American-led globalization. That era is now coming to, again, the end of its 3 or 4 decade. And I think what we're now in, we're in a situation where free trade has been replaced by tariffs. Cosmopolitanism is being replaced by nationalism. Small government is being replaced by big government. Low inflation has been replaced by higher inflation. Low interest rates are being replaced by higher interest rates. The era of China being subservient to the Americas coming to the end. And now we're going to a new phase. And I think that phase could last us 3 or 4 decades. And the reason there's so much anxiety now, and political anxiety is exemplified by tariffs, is we're in this shifting point between these two regimes, not unlike 1990. So 1990, if you were a communist in 1990, of which half the world were, it must have been a very dislocating period because your ideology was gone and you had to start again. So this is all Russia, all the former Soviet Union, etc. We are now in a position, I think, where globalization, as I have known it for the last 30 years and has defined the background noise of my career as an economist, I think is now moving into a much more managed trade, much more confrontational position between America and China. And gradually, people are going to have to take sides.
The globalization period, I presume, was kickstarted very heavily by Thatcher.
And Reagan, yeah.
Ronald Reagan. How do you see political leaders today in comparison to Reagan and Thatcher, and what are the dynamics that you think are driving the basically the increasing barriers and deglobalization?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good question because so Reagan and Thatcher come in the early 80s. By the time they were done, the Soviet Union was over. I mean, this is quite an achievement for two politicians, always not the flavor of the month, both confrontational politicians, both very ideological politicians, but they knew what they wanted to bring their countries. I think Trump is the same. I think Trump is similar. I think we underestimate Trump. I think Trump is the type of new politician that Trump is Reagan-esque in what I believe his legacy will be for decades, not for years. And that legacy is protectionist. It is transactional. It is committed completely to destroying the consensus that was built up after 1945 of the IMF, of the UN, of the World Bank, these multilateral organizations. And I think the commentariat are describing the various different populist parties as mini Trumps and mini this. I mean, so they're kind of humiliating and besmirching the new leaders. The new leaders in Europe have all got an authoritarian streak that Trump has. They all have a nationalist streak that Trump has. They have a protectionist streak. And this is what I'm saying is I think we're going into a politics and as a result, a geoeconomics that we haven't seen for a long, long time.
And does that leave you optimistic or pessimistic about the global economy?
I think what it leaves me is that the one thing about the global economy, Andrew, is it always adapts. Like the economy, I've always thought that one of the problems with economists is they see economics as a branch of physics, straight lines, things, rules that are immutable and solid. I see economics as a brand of biology. So it's much more like evolution. It's messy. Shit happens and we react to it. Okay? And how we react to it and how we adapt to it, it's not always the survival of the most fit, it's the survival of the most adaptive. So I think that what we will find is just a new set of rules. There will be a tax on international trade, call it tariffs, whatever you want to call it, and we'll deal with it. I really don't think that what we're going into is an apocalyptic scenario. I think that if you look at the history of economics, which I've tried to do in the book, it's the history of a competition of ideas, of resources, of individuals, and eventually the thing writes itself as long as we're not too ideological, as long as we don't superimpose rules from the top that we feel everyone should accord to, as long as you give people the space to do their thing, people figure things out. It's an amazing thing, the human mind, which is essentially the engine of economics. Basically, what happens in the economy begins between your ears in this mad little place called the human brain. And it's a function of imagination. The people who build these buildings here, they're dreamers. They're not bureaucrats. They're not technocrats. They're fellas who sit down and say, wouldn't it be amazing to build a building like this? Can we finance some of it? Can we get the right architectures? Can we get the right buildings? Everything that is good in humanity starts with a mad dream that is normally dismissed by half the population.
It does. It starts with a mad dream and then 7-8 years of bureaucratic review, analysis.
But do you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is that, the reason I'm optimistic about global economics is I see the global economy as just a derivative of or related to the human spirit, which is kind of indomitable. And yes, Trump is changing the world, but rather than say, okay, he's the worst thing that happened and this is awful and I can't believe it, say, okay, well, Donald Trump is a signal from a democratic country that something is wrong. He is evidence that something is wrong. The thing about democracy is democracy has a great habit of putting manners on people. And people vote. And so people have voted for Trump because they feel pissed off about something. And he's trying to fix it. Now, I don't agree with a lot of stuff Trump does, but the United States is still the singular most important country on the globe. Their financial markets, their dollar, these are all the most important financial instruments we have. So what happens in America should be analysed and seen and not dismissed.
So obviously, having written a book about money, and I'm keen to understand what your favourite money is, because that's obviously a very important question. But the US dollar, historically, a strong US dollar has sort of almost been policy, I guess. It doesn't seem to be now. Where do you see Trump and the dollar?
I think. Look, there's 2 or 3 ways of answering that. I think that still the United States dollar is the preeminent clearing currency in the world. The United States also is the only world leader. So to have a reserve currency, you have to have the balls to bail out the world. That's a very interesting idea. So you have to have a Federal Reserve that if the world requires dollars, the Federal Reserve has got the financial wherewithal to print that money. So it means that being the global monetary standard comes with great privileges, but huge responsibilities. And we have built since, let's say, not so much the Second World War, let's really actively since the 60s, we have built a financial system anchored by this currency. Now, of course, the currency is weakening progressively as the United States share of global GDP contracts. But we're still talking about a country with about 23% of global GDP. It's still very, it's got 4% of the world's population and 23 or 24% of the world's GDP. So it's still a monster, right? It still is a monster. Now, with respect to Trump, I think there's a conflict at the heart of the Trump regime. There is the family business called the Trump family. They are creating enormous immediate wealth or apparent on paper wealth themselves through their various crypto scams. And they are scams, right? This is a family that isn't beyond selling Bibles, right? They're selling Bibles, they're selling crypto, they're selling...
Which is unprecedented in politics.
Unprecedented. But at least we're seeing it for what it is, right? It is unprecedented. It's shameless. It's unprecedented. But it is what it is. And then you have the dollar. The question that the market wants to answer, or a lot of people in our business want to answer is Trump actively undermining the United States' most potent global weapon, which is its currency? I don't think so. I think we can be alarmist about it. I don't see a currency emerging of a country or a series of countries that wants to shoulder the responsibility. So you think the European Union. So the euro isn't a bad currency. Many people said it was going to fail. It hasn't done so. It's deep. It's reasonably well resourced. Is there anyone in the ECB that says if the world goes into a euro crisis, we'll print euros to bail out the Americans? No. Our friends up the road, the Chinese, they don't want that either. They have no interest in becoming the world's currency. So I think the dollar is here for another couple of decades at least.
How do you see the US economy? Because obviously I see the Australian economy as highly linked to what happens in the US. Pleased if you don't agree.
Yeah,
say so.
Complete.
Where do you see the US, like interest rates, generally employment?
Yeah.
Where's it
I mean, the interesting about Australia and the US is, Australia is the only country that since the Second World War has fought every American war.
We love a war.
Every time you like a war, you love a war. You love a war, but every time the Yanks say, line up behind us, you do it. And I presume that comes from the fact that if it hadn't been for the Yanks, the Japanese could have easily taken this place in 1942. So there's a legacy of, we're on your side. And you've moved in lockstep with them, which is, and I even saw that yesterday with the Albanese-Trump meeting. It's very much a close relationship. The United States economy is amazing in the sense of how it confounds all the skeptics. So every time, every couple of years, you get people saying it's all over for the Yanks, this, that, and the other. I feel that, look, they are in the middle of an extraordinary AI boom and clearly bust cycle. There's no doubt of that. They have an extraordinary concentration of wealth and interest in a tiny sector of the economy. They've doubled down on this bet. I think this will probably end badly for the United States. I think Trump's presidency, if this is his last one, let's see if it is. Okay, it may well not be. But I think the Trump presidency, they might be fighting an election in 2028 against the backdrop of an AI bust, which I think will be a big problem for them. But to come back to the American economy, their ability to regenerate themselves, to reorganize themselves, to reimagine the society is endless. And again, that comes from this thing I talk about, the spirit. It's not from the policy. It's not some great orchestrated bureaucratic idea. There's something
it's
in
the people.
It's the American DNA. It's the people.
They're up and about.
They're up and about and they fucking go for it. And if things don't work for them, they just say, you know what, that's great. It's like in Ireland, and it's a cliche, but it's true. If you fail, you have a stigma. It's like, oh, your man McWilliams, he published a book, it didn't do well. Oh, I wouldn't go near him again. In America, your man McWilliams published a book, it doesn't do well. He dusts himself down. Somebody else comes up and says, you're a good lad, I'll back you again. So it's that.
That's right. And on the other side, Americans celebrate success and they look up to people who've made a lot of money. Whereas in Australia, I don't know what it's like in Ireland. It's quite the opposite.
It's all poppies.
Well, I think it was Bono once said on an Irish TV station. Bono was asked about, what's it like? The U2 guys were young and they were like the biggest band in the world. And he was asked, and he must have been about 29 or 30 at this stage, and he was asked, what's the difference? And Bono says very simply, he said, look, in America, if a guy sees a big house on the top of a hill, the average American dude says, one day, I want to be like that fella. He said, in Ireland, if you see a big house on the top of the hill, you say, one day I want to get that lad. And that's, I think, what Aussies have too.
I think we've become very Irish.
You become even more Irish.
More
It's in your DNA. It's in your blood. No, but I don't think so. I think that there is a flamboyant dynamism in Australia that I can feel on the street, which I don't feel in Europe.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
So just to pick up on that point, David, you touched on it before about maybe at some point you'll have to pick a side. We're obviously strategically located in Asia, which you touched upon in your top podcast this week. And we have this incredible relationship with the United States, which was on display when Prime Minister Albanese met Trump a couple of days ago. How do we balance that going forward, which is relevant, for example, with this rare earths issue at the moment, where we've done a deal with the Americans, or the Yanks as you call them, and China want the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is if you look at history is clever countries never make choices. That's the key, right? A clever country hedges their bets all the time. So what I would say is I would compare Australia. So you have this elemental relationship, clearly elemental from the elements with China. China's quarry, WA. you have this strategic, cultural, economic and financial relationship with the United States. So you're a wee bit like if you've ever been in a horse race. You ever see a jockey riding two horses, right? You know, in a steeplechase, the horses lose the jockeys. Some young fella's sent on at the end to grab up all the loose horses. So the young fella is riding the two horses, right? As long as the two horses are going in the right way, the young fella's nether regions are okay. Now, imagine Australia is the jockey. You're riding two horses, the Chinese horse here and the American horse here. Now, as long as the Chinese and Americans are having trade deals, they're going the right way, they're broadly going the way, the Aussie jockey can ride the pair of horses. When the two horses start going this way, which they are doing now, Australia's bollocks gets very, very upset, okay? It gets very uncomfortable. And I think that's where Australia is, and where Australia wants is for the two horses to come back together again. So anything that looks like a deal between the Yanks and the Chinese is very good for yourselves, because what the last thing you want to do is get into one camp or the other. And the reason is, although it's a continent in and of itself, it's not big enough to choose, because the cost of choosing China is enormous. The cost of choosing exclusively America over China is enormous. So what you want to do is diplomatically play the game that you can actually fudge the issue. And the interesting thing is, you can. There's a problem, there's a sort of a macho-ness. And people say, well, you make a choice and we stand up for this. No, don't make a choice. Be clever. And I think Australia will be clever. China needs you. America needs you. And what you've just got to do is just keep playing the game.
I think one of the reasons that the Australian government and the Australian people was so indignant with the tariffs being placed on Australian goods is this feeling that we should be loved. You know, we have a special relationship with America. How could you do this to us? Do it to New Zealand. Don't do it to us.
Do it to the Kiwis.
Do it to anybody but us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated for someone that's obviously comes from Ireland. How do you think the rest of the world sees Australia? I know how you see us, but how?
I think the idea of wanting to be loved, that's not unique to Australia. I mean, imagine what it feels like to be.
We deserve to be loved.
You deserve to.
Imagine
Imagine what it feels like to be Irish and to be humiliated by the Yanks. I mean, we have tariffs being placed on us by American. There's 44 million Irish Americans, right? I mean, they are our second cousins in effect. I think that also the wanting to be loved is a sort of a sign of insecurity. You take a nation like the French, they don't want to be loved by anyone. They don't mind being hated. They have a sort of pomposity. We have, and I put yourselves and ourselves in this position, we understand that we're playing a game that is a long game, and that Australia is not a rule maker, it's a rule taker. And when you're a rule taker in the global world, you have to be much more clever. And you've got to flirt, and you've got to play the game, all that sort of stuff. But I would say that the rest of the world sees Australia, it's very interesting. When you come from Europe and you make the 24-hour journey, Australia seems like the center of the world. When you're in Europe, and I suspect the same if you're in Houston, Texas, or in California, or in New England, Australia doesn't feature. Now, that is a good thing, because it allows you to do your own thing. It's so far away from the world. It is, there's a reason Peter Thiel has his gaffes in New Zealand, right? This part of the world is so far away from anywhere else that you can really do your own thing unnoticed. And I think you've been doing that. I mean, when I go back to Ireland, I say, do you know the Aussies haven't had a recession since the late 80s? People can't.
We had one in 91.
Yeah, a kind of Mickey Mouse one.
Well, I lived through it, I can tell you.
Was it quite a bad one?
It was nasty.
The one we.
But it's a long time ago.
It certainly sorted out every self-respecting entrepreneur.
So it destroyed a whole. Was it property based? Was it banking based? Was it
all of the above? It was a serious recession. I mean,
and it was Gulf War based. It was triggered by the Gulf War.
The recession was interest rates were 21%. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, but so it was.
I think it was actually triggered by a currency crisis in Japan or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was early in my career,
and it was serious.
And it's left deep scar tissue. Names such as Bond, Skase, Elliott, big entrepreneurs back in the early 90s, all obliterated. Westpac almost went under. One of our big banks here. It was nasty, and I think it's certainly for me, it's something that other than the global financial crisis and COVID, is something I remember deeply, because I can see when you're managing money, and your book on money, I'm sure you'd be very aware of this. When you're managing money like we do as a business, you've always got to be just a bit paranoid that when's the next recession.
Yeah.
And I know I know many economists. Some of my great friends are economists, and they've picked 6 of the last 2 recessions.
Yeah, I know. I know.
So,
Picked very well.
so they're more paranoid.
Yeah.
Imagine being an Irish economist.
Yeah.
You're paranoid and
You're paranoid, neurotic, oxymoronic, the whole thing.
Yeah.
No, but it's. I mean, I think so. But again, if you were to speak to people and say, do you know there hasn't been a recession in Australia for 4 decades in effect?
Yeah.
People don't know that story. And you contrast that with the United States that we were sort of eulogizing about that. Since 1990, the United States have had 3 major recessions. They have had 1 banking crisis, which almost destroyed them. Their politics has gone from sort of wokeism to populism to wokeism back to populism. Like, I mean, it's been springing around all over the place. It is a nation gripped by what is in effect a culture war. And yet down here, this country has gone through years and years of progressive, positive growth. And growth means wealth creation. Growth means people are getting richer. It means that the average family, despite all the cost issues, and it is an expensive country, are in a better position than they were a couple of decades ago. So what I'm saying is that people think of Australia only when there's a crisis in Australia. There hasn't been a crisis here for a long time, so you just get on with it. And I really think that's not a bad place to be.
I think there's no question that everybody in Australia, probably everybody globally generally, are much better off in 2025 than they were in 1945.
Absolutely.
There's no question, standards of living much higher. I think we're all very proud Australians, I guess, because we see it as a wonderful place to live. But I think you're very correct in what you say. Is when I listened to your podcasts and I heard how effusive you were about the strength of the economy, the spirit of our people. Being an Aussie, being a typical Aussie, I sort of think, we're not that good. Things aren't that great. Things are tough.
I mean, look, we'll see how your rugby team does in the next.
What's that?
The rugby union, the minority sport, the minority sport.
This is a
I know this is a league. This is a league house.
No, I was going to say this is a major podcast, David. We don't talk about minor sports.
Mickey Mouse sports. But we'll see how the Wallabies do. I think you're playing Japan. Is it this weekend?
We'd have to defer to Andrew Martin, our resident expert on the Wallabies, wouldn't we, Andrew Brewer?
I don't even know what the Wallabies are.
Yeah, they play in yellow, which is always a little bit of a.
The Wiggles or something.
Yeah, the Wiggles, yeah.
We've got the Ashes coming up, and Rory McIlroy is coming to Australia in December for the Australian Open Golf.
Speaking of Rory McIlroy, I have a theory that what we should use in Ireland is we should elevate Rory McIlroy to be our key diplomat with Trump, right? So Trump, right? Think about Trump.
No,
right?
we've already tried that. Andrew will explain.
He could become president.
Easy peasy. But think of someone like Trump. Like Trump loves to play a bit of golf. He loves celebrity. Rory is now the world's number 1. Has been for many, has been up there for the last 20 years. I think the Irish government should
the Americans treated him very nicely recently.
No, they didn't.
That was
his missus as
unbelievable.
well. It was his wife they were having a go at.
No, we've already tried this in Australia, copying us, because when the tariffs were initially proposed to be imposed before Trump brought out his big green board on the lawn there and he explained the numbers, we deployed Greg Norman, who does play golf with President Trump, to effectively be our number 1 diplomat and try and negotiate some type of appeasement in the background.
But my point is really serious. Is that we're going into a strange world. In the old days, you had diplomats and bureaucrats and politicians, and they did the deals, and there was channels open, right? Trump has destroyed that. He's, basically deals are now done on football pitches, on golf courses, and in celebrities, rather than decide, isn't this awful? We just said, this is the new world. And countries and companies and individuals deploy what I call your soft power. So we've got hard power, in Australia is the hard power, the military or whatever it happens to be, right? Countries have soft power too, which is the power of imagination, which is where the country locates itself in pivotal moments. And you deploy whatever you can to change people's perceptions of you. Because The problem with our world is that so much of policy is all driven by objectives, right? Our objective is to minimize inequality. Why not have policy that's driven by outcomes? What is the best policy to get you where you want to go? Forget the objectives. What's the outcome? And if it is deploying Rory McIlroy to play golf with Donny J in Mar-a-Lago, go for it. That's the way I've seen it. I think that's what I talk about, the adaptability of the human spirit. You know, the generals fighting the last war is a euphemism for why we make mistakes. The last war is over. We're into a new game.
Where do you see, pivoting forward slightly, David, where do you see opportunity now? In your book, you speak about the different backgrounds, the Greeks, the Italians, how they forged forward in mathematics and forged forward in finance and create a lot of the principles that exist today behind money. Who do you see as the next innovators?
The next Dutch people.
Apart from Andrew here.
Exactly.
Apart from Andrew here.
That's from Andrew.
Who do you see as the next innovators
It's a really good question, because one of the things that's intrigued me over the years is why certain countries kind of clicked this money thing. They got it. They figured out, double entry bookkeeping. They figured out how to create a deep market for capital. They figured out how to borrow from one crowd, lend to the other crowd. They figured out futures contracts. They figured out, this has always intrigued me, these moments of financial innovation. And what you see, there's a couple of nations that come out as being particularly good with money. The one that really stands out in the book for me was the Dutch in the 17th century. They were particularly good with money. And they changed people's perceptions. These are people who started share trading. Now think about the notion of that not only are you actually investing capital in something, but they used to call it windhandel, which means trading on the wind, which was speculation. And what I'm seeing is that always and everywhere, financial innovation goes with economic dynamism. But the question is, what's chicken and what's egg? Is it the dynamism that drags the finance, or is it the finance that pushes the dynamism? So you would expect that financial innovation, the next phase, will come from somewhere around Asia, because this is where the growth rate is. This is where people are actually investing. This is where the entrepreneurs are coming from. This is where the new corporations are going to come from. And this is where arguably the greatest leaps in finance will come from, because you have a country like China, which is financially quite far behind. It's heavily regulated, etc. Think about what's going to happen in China when they deregulate that capital market properly. The place is going to boom.
You think that'll happen?
I think it will happen, yeah. I think it will happen.
What do you think the future of cash is? And how's that
I'm a
going
great
to
believer in
affect
cash due to my endemic criminal behavior. No,
Right.
exactly. I think cash is going to survive in a microcosm. I think it's,
Governments don't seem to like cash.
I've been tapping since I arrived here. I couldn't tell you what the Aussie $10 note looks like.
No, it's
right?
amazing, because I go to America frequently, and they were a very late adapter to tapping.
They are. And they still are in certain areas.
They've got it now, and you can go and buy a coffee where they do nothing for you, and you still have to tap.
Yeah,
20%
exactly.
tip.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you didn't do anything for
anything.
me. Exactly. But the interesting is, if you go to Germany, there's absolutely no digital finance. You've got to pay with cash everywhere, because the Germans, because of their history, are scared of people being able to trace them. So it's actually a human civil right movement that they don't want to. So you go to Berlin, capital of Germany, go to a restaurant, bills a couple of €100, you got to stump up the cash. It's just because it's cultural. They don't want, because for their perception is that digital economy is a traceable economy. The interesting thing about cash is it's traceless.
Got to ask the question: Bitcoin, believer, not
No,
believer?
I'm not a believer at all. And the reason I'm not a believer comes back to the conversation we had about governments, is that money is a public good in this country, Australia, for example. The Aussie dollar is made whole by the fact that the Aussie government requires you to pay your taxes in this thing called the dollar. So therefore the dollar and the system are soldered onto each other. And money is as much part of the Australian political and economic system as your police force is. You can't decide, I'm going to get a vigilante force to police Sydney. You have the cops. The Aussie army is the Aussie army. You can't have a vigilante army here. no government will allow a bunch of privateers to take over the financial system through the mechanism of currency. And I think eventually what we'll have is Bitcoin. I've always compared money a wee bit to like language, in the sense that we spoke at the beginning, Andrew, about the US dollar. What gives the US dollar its potency is that everybody uses it. So its usability gives us its strength. So if you get into the back of a taxi in Kenya, taxi driver will tell you about the exchanges, the dollar to the Kenyan shilling, and you can trade with them. So the dollar is a wee bit like the English language, in the sense it's the default language and the default currency for the world. Bitcoin is like Esperanto, right? For people who speak Esperanto, it is, so just if listeners don't know, Esperanto was a makey-uppy language that was constructed in order to be the international language of choice, and everybody would speak it. Now nobody speaks it. So for people who speak Esperanto, it's incredibly important. The rest of us don't give a shit.
They're Collingwood supporters.
Yeah, I will have to see Collingwood.
The official language.
Yeah. But my point is, Bitcoin is the Esperanto of money.
So
it's incredibly important.
How does it end?
I think it ends like everything that is a mirage. It's like, did your kids ever collect Pokemon cards? They were very important to kids for a certain period, a certain time in their life, and then it becomes a memory. My sense is that Bitcoin will just be there. It'll survive. It's basically a solution looking for a problem. And that is never a good place to start. I think that it'll be a curiosity, a financial curiosity. When books like this are written in 100 years' time, there'll be a chapter on Bitcoin and punters will snigger at it. That does not mean that digital currencies are not the future, but digital currencies will be printed by, and I use the word printed advisedly, they'll be orchestrated by and managed by central banks, because we come back to that basic idea that money is the state and the state is money. Now, if you believe that the state is going to disappear and we're going to have some sort of apocalyptic scenario, and the future of the world is like a Mad Max dystopian future where you have out in the bush someone like a Mel Gibson style person emerges in 30 years' time after the apocalypse with a bag of Bitcoin. If you think that's the future, that's cool. I don't think that's the future. So my sense is that it's a curiosity. It's a leader in something in the digital world, but the world will catch up and states will reassert their primacy.
Interesting. And where do you see gold sitting in this? If you venture down about 500 metres from where we're recording this to Martin Place, have you been to Martin Place?
Just down beside.
Just beautiful central Sydney. There's a gold dealership. I'm not sure if it's the Perth Mint that's in
Bullion,
something
ABC
like that.
Bullion, something to that effect.
And if you walk down Martin Place, you'll see today, unless they've gone since the gold.
No, they're
price,
still there. I've seen them all week.
There's a 100-metre queue.
Punters buying gold.
Of people lining up to buy gold.
Both directions.
And if you went
Really?
and asked them why they
Actually, I should go down and have a look at
If you
that.
went and asked them why they're doing it, I'm sure most of them don't know, because they just think there's a queue, I'll just get in it, because that seems like a good thing to do.
I'm doing nothing more.
I walk past and think there's a lot of people that are about to lose money, but what's the psychology of people that buy things like Bitcoin and gold?
This is fascinating. So the question I've always wanted to answer in my head as an economist when I'm teaching the kids or when I'm writing books or when I'm out working for institutions like yourselves is, it's a really simple question. Why do people buy things as a general rule, right? People buy things because other people buy things. We are a social animal, and economists come on and they say things like, the first rule of economics is man is rational. It's okay. And they say, and the kids sometimes say this to me in college, and I say, well, what does that mean? They say, well, we've read this in the book in our economics textbooks, that when man is making economic decisions, now keep the people the gold in the back of your head, man is cold, scientific, logical, mathematical, clear thinking, and utility maximizing. And I'm thinking, have you ever met a human being like that? Would you go for a drink with someone like that? No, right? We are not only are we not rational, we are madly irrational. That's what makes us glorious. That's what makes us support football teams and, do mad things, right? It's an irrationality.
I'm going to bet on this horse because I like its name.
That sort of stuff. Like, I have friends of mine now at our age who are on their third marriage. I'm saying, lads, what bit of the first two marriages don't you get? And they'd say, oh, no, man, this time it's different. I'd say, really? Yeah, she loves me. And I'm like, she's 29, man. You're 55. It's the irrationality of the human spirit, right? So take that idea.
We're going to consider that as a generalisation to our listeners.
Our legal department will review that part of the podcast.
Your 55-year-old mates or 56-year-old mates who are on the third wife.
Well,
but my point is...
I do have a close friend who'll be squirming listening to this, by the way. I'm not going to name you, don't worry.
But my point is, guys, we're irrational. So let's go back to our gold guys, right? The gold people are buying gold because other people are buying gold. And the reason is that we are a social animal. We infect each other. We infect each other with FOMO. We talk. People say, oh my God, that apartment, your man bought it for 500 grand. He sold it for 700. It's like, shit, I better do that myself. This is how we are.
Yeah.
And
that's why stocks run
to
crazy prices.
To crazy prices because we are kind of crazy. So I'm saying the gold people in the back of their head, they're like, somebody told me that the dollar is going to weaken and gold has gone up and my mate bought it at $400 and now it's gone up to $600 and I'm in. That's the extent of the thinking process. It's FOMO, it's fear, it's irrationality. But for me, it's also the beautiful, mad side of humanity. And if you understand that economics is nothing more than the study of us humans, then the queues of punters down the road in Martin Square, is it?
Martin Place.
Martin Place. That is just another beautiful representation
I think most of
the
them are
madness.
Irish.
I have no
we
doubt.
have 120,000 Irishmen.
Listen, we were the people who came up with the Eureka flag in your first gold rush, and we're very, very happy to be part of your second and third gold rush. I mean, gold rushes are part of the Aussie DNA.
We're happy selling our gold to the Irish. I'm sure when you get on the plane to head back, you'll have saddlebags full of gold.
I'll have saddlebags full of, and I'll be cursing you. Next time, is that fair?
Good luck.
That's
David,
great.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Sorry for incriminating your mates on the third marriage, but hey, what can we do?
It's been a lot of fun. Well, I certainly enjoyed that part of it.
It was good advice, I reckon. You're off to lunch?
I'm
Aussie
off to lunch.
Friday lunch.
Yeah, I'm off to lunch. I hope to go to a place called Burnt Orange, which is run by a mate of mine, a guy called Porrick Devlin, another immigrant to the country.
Mossman tradition, the
Perfect.
burnt orange.
So there I'm heading off. But listen, thanks, gents. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's great having you, and it's the last time we're ever going to mention the word orange on this podcast.